5, I think.
Yeah, you should have looked at. Angela has to get that.
Well, we're going to actually go to question 5. And why do salt and water vary in your urine? Why do you think they're variable in your urine?
Because you might use them.
That's right, due to diet, right? And environment. So if you drink lots and lots of water, you're going to vary how much water is in your urine, right? That's the basic concept. So as I eat and drink, or I go outside in the summertime, I'm going to change my urine values for these. So how do you think they're controlled? How does your body control those values in your urine? Go back to 232.
Hormones.
Hormones is an answer. Hormones. So hormones. So now you gotta go back to that chart from hell from last term, which you threw away the day after the final. What were the 2 hormones that affect salt and water in the kidney tubules?
ADH.
Gosh, remember that. I'm so happy. You remember something I taught you. And the other one?
Aldosterone.
Aldosterone or mineral corticoids. I'm so happy you remember something. All right, let's review. What's the job of ADH?
Water retention.
Retain water, to reabsorb water from the urine. So ADH will tell your kidneys, tell your nephrons, I need more water in me. Aldosterone's job is to reabsorb sodium or salt. We'll say salt. Okay, so these hormones are going to vary based upon what I eat and drink. And we're going to make a graph over there in a minute, but first I'm going to show you the animation of these hormones and what they're doing. All right? So, let's figure out where I put it. Right here. There it is. Okay, so to get your bearings, we had this last week. This was the urine or the filtrate, so this is P. Over here on the right, this is me. So the urine's on the left, my bloodstream's on the right. And so if things are going from left to right, that means what's happening if they go from here to here? They're being reabsorbed. They're coming out of the urine, out of P into me. They're going this way, that means they are being secreted or coming out of my urine, out of my body into my urine. So I'm going to click where it says, click. I'm releasing aldosterone. What do you see? What do you notice the little red things are doing?
Exploding.
They're exploding. Well, they are. What are those little red things?
Salt.
Those are sodium, salt. So which way is all the sodium going real fast? From where to where?
Back in your body.
Left,
From
right.
here to here. So I'm reabsorbing sodium. How am I reabsorbing it? Through what?
Magic.
Magic or the channels. So remember we talked about that last time, that there are channels in your nephrons that absorb stuff. So here there are sodium channels that are absorbing sodium, reabsorbing it out of my urine back into me because I want to keep it. I want to keep my salt. Okay? So I'm using aldosterone to turn on these channels to increase the sodium. All right? So let's try the next one. We're going to do ADH right there. I am clicking it there. So what's that big blue balloon going left to right? What is that?
Water.
That's water. So it's going left to right. It must be what?
Permeable.
Reabsorption or going from urine into my body. How's it getting in there? What are these?
Aquaporins.
Aquaporins or water channels. Saladin calls them aquaporins. That's fancy speak for water channel. Right? So again, we have tubes, we have channels, transmembrane proteins, that let the water get from my pee back into me, controlled by ADH. Make sense? So these are controlling the number of channels that determine where the stuff goes. So if you understood that idea, then you should be able to figure this out. Okay? So we have here Joe. Joe's going to drink some water. I'll turn it on so you can hear the great sound effects. All right. We're going to make him dehydrated. So Joe is dehydrated. So look over here, and look over there and tell me what's happening. What is Joe doing? He's reabsorbing what? Water and sodium. Why would you, I understand the water thing, right? Why would you reabsorb salt if you're dehydrated?
Because water follows.
Water follows salt. Remember osmosis from 112, right? If I'm saltier, water by osmosis comes to me. So I'm going to reabsorb sodium. I'm going to reabsorb water together. Now he's going to drink water. He's going to overhydrate. What do you think you're going to see? Anyone hazard me a guess? You're just going to wait for the answer? Let's try it. So Joe's going to drink. Did any of you actually watch what's going on over here?
Yeah.
You just watched the drink. Okay, let's try this again. First time I ever taught this class, I did that. I said, what'd you see? Well, he drank water. No! All right. All right. Okay, so dehydrated, right? Now he's going to overhydrate or become more hydrated. So what do you see on the left-hand side of the nephron here?
No aquaporin.
Channels are being removed, right? So now the water and sodium cannot be reabsorbed. Why am I not reabsorbing them?
You don't need it.
Because I don't need them. So we're going to make a graph over here of that concept. I'll turn off Joe's drinking. We're going to graph body water over time. Let's be quiet, Joe. Joe, let's be quiet. There you go. Body water over time. So, when Joe was dehydrated, first animation, what did his kidneys do? They reabsorbed water, and they reabsorbed what?
Salt.
Salts, or sodium. So when I'm low on body water, I'm going to reabsorb those from my urine. I'm going to take the water and salt out of my urine because I want to keep it and put it back into my bloodstream. I'm going to reabsorb it. Right? Okay, so what hormones would increase to do that? Looking at that board, what hormones would have to go up to reabsorb those?
ADH.
So I'm going to have more ADH. It's going to tell me to reabsorb the water. And what would tell me to do the sodium? Aldosterone. So I'm going to see an increase in those hormones to tell my nephrons to reabsorb more. How do they reabsorb more? What do they have more of? Channels. By increasing water channels, which we'll call those today, and by increasing sodium channels. So ADH and aldosterone tell my nephron to build doors to let the stuff back in. Aquaporin doors. Make sense? So if I absorb stuff out of my urine, that means it goes back into my body, like this. Now, let's do this graph. You have too much. Joe overdrank water. So what's he going to do to ADH and aldosterone?
Reduce.
It's going to turn them off because I sure don't want more. So what's that going to do to the channels in his nephron? What happened to his channels on that animation? Close them. So we're going to remove channels. Close channels. Remember in Mouse Party, downregulate from 231? We're going to downregulate our channels. If I don't have channels, what can't I do? I can't reabsorb. There's no door to reabsorb. So I'm going to reabsorb less. So I'm going to let less of it back in my body. Okay, that makes sense? Let's add the final piece to this. If I'm reabsorbing less water, where would it be? Where would it stay?
Blood.
In the pee. So I'm going to have more urine. Because I'm not reabsorbing the water stays in the urine. What color do you think it is if there's lots of water? Clear. usually clear because it's being flushed out of your body. So help me with this one. If I reabsorb water and salt from my urine, how much urine will I make? That's less urine. And what color will it be, say ye?
Yellow.
Dark. Because I've taken the water out of it, leaving only the waste behind. Your mom told you if you're peeing clear you drank enough, she's using this graph. The more water I drink, the more water I have to flush out because I don't want it anymore in my body. Make sense? And if I pee enough water, the graph will eventually go back down. Negative feedback, right? Screech, scream. So we're going to do that on Joe some more. Lights. I'll do it just like that. So we're going to actually look at that graph. Joe. Right, yeah, not that one. Okay, so here's Joe. We're looking at his nephron, PCT, loop, the stuff I taught you last week. And we're going to watch the water as it goes through. So here's Joe being, quote, normal, whatever that means. So take a look at his urine there. And what do you see?
Urea and water,
Yep, and what am I doing with the urea in the water?
reabsorbing it.
Reabsorbing it. How am I reabsorbing the water? What do you think these things are?
Channel.
Those are the channels. So I have some channels. I'm reabsorbing some water. Okay, we'll talk about the urea in just a minute. So I'm reabsorbing some water out of my nephron back into my body in the collecting duct in DCT. So now I'm going to underhydrate him. What do you think you're going to see?
More pee.
Find out. What do you notice there?
Darker pee.
More channels, because that graph says you have to build more channels. You have to upregulate, right? And what are those channels enabling you to do? More water comes into my body, leaving less water in my urine. And it's getting darker because it's getting more concentrated. Make sense? Okay, try this one. If I overhydrate Joe, what do you think you're going to see? No more channels. Why are there no more channels? I don't want the water, right? So I build channels to reabsorb. I don't want to reabsorb, so I take away the channels. So tell me about his urine. How much is there?
A
A
lot.
whole lot. It's full of water. Question?
What, is there negative consequences of being overhydrated?
You can turn off your brain. If you really overhydrate, you'll die. You can do that with babies really easily. If you give babies lots and lots of water, they basically die. If you drink water faster than you can pee, you'll die. So water will kill you.
No biggie.
Do you remember there's that woman in Sacramento, maybe
Like
5, 6
yes.
years ago, that tried to win an iPod by drinking?
Yes.
She's dead now because of that. Yeah. She drank water faster than her kidneys can urinate, so she ended up destroying her brain. We'll do that in a little bit. Right, let's go back to this. Right. So I'm controlling the channels that controls the urine and controls whether or not it gets reabsorbed. So I want you to look at something else. Look at these numbers. You don't have to know them for this class. I want you to look at the numbers. This is how salty your kidney is. So what do you notice as you go down the kidney from the cortex to medulla? What do you notice about the numbers? Saltier. Why would you want a salty kidney?
It allows you to draw the water.
Allows you to pull water, right? Salt attracts water. So having a salty kidney helps me get the water to stay. So now look at the numbers when I underhydrate you. What do you notice about the numbers in my kidney?
They increased.
They increase. My kidney is saltier than before. Why would you want a saltier kidney? Because I want to keep that water in. That's what the urea is doing. Urea is a waste product, but you can use it as a salt to help draw water into your kidney. So even though you don't want urea, you can use it as part of an osmotic gradient. I'm never going to test you on that concept. But if you're wondering why the urea is in the animation, you use that to help build osmolarity. So under normal conditions, you can use urea to keep the kidneys slightly salty. But that's what that means. That makes sense though? So your urine concentration matches his diet and exercise. So if that made perfect sense, which I'm sure it did, we're going to test that knowledge. Here we go. So our job now is to predict what you'll see with ADH over time with different amounts. So I'm going to pick one of these, and you're going to tell me about the ADH. Let's pick normal. If I pick normal, what do you think you're going to see? How much ADH is normal? Normal. So what that means is I'm going to filter my blood, and I'm going to urinate roughly 1% of it, because I'm only reabsorbing some of it. I'm going to dehydrate you. How much ADH should there be?
Lots.
Lots, whatever that means. So how much urine will you make?
Not much at all.
You're going to remove a lot. You're going to reabsorb less. I'm sorry, reabsorb more, urinate less. Sorry, I got that backwards. And then if I'm overhydrated, ADH should go down. That's what the graph is showing you. So I'm going to filter and reabsorb less, and then I'm going to urinate more. So half a quart to 5 gallons is the range you got, depending on how much you're drinking. Right? Yeah, 22.5 liters is roughly 5 gallons per day. But that's your ADH levels matching your diet. Make sense? Yeah.
So is there, if you are retaining salt in order to have more water retaining power, is there some point of saltiness at which it starts to like denature proteins in your
Yes.
body or something?
Over 160 milliequivalents per liter will actually cause your neurons not to work.
Is
So
that-
salt's okay to a point. So you'll notice you'll get these carpopedal spasms, your fingers will tingle, you'll have like these weird muscle cramps. That's warning you you're getting a little too much salt because the nerves are overreactive with salt. But you have to eat a lot of salt to get
Or if you get really dehydrated?
or really dehydrated. Yeah, so anytime you're really overly dehydrated, you can mess this up. But normally your kidneys can compensate for normal arrangements. Make sense? So now we're going to put you to the test. Because if you understood what I taught you last week, and you understood what I taught you today, you can analyze anyone's pee and make sense of it. You didn't do your analysis yet, right? That's 2 weeks after your exam. Okay, so when you get to your analysis, you just have to think about what I taught you last week and today, and you can interpret everyone's pee all day long. So here we go. I'm running this bus, so I'm gonna pick A first. So you look at the amount, look at the color. You click into this machine we don't have. So you look at the chemicals, right? You look at this thing called osmolarity, which is how thick, how salty, how liquid it is. You can define it differently. So tell me, what do you see? Interpret that. Is there anything there that shouldn't be there? No. Say no. No. Okay. No, let's see. Should urine have water in it? Yep. Should it have waste? Yep. Should it have salts? Yep. Should it be normal? Yep. Looks yellow? Yep. 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 So that's normal. Right? It's perfectly normal pee. Right? So if it looks like that, oh, no. Right? So mostly water, salts, some wastes. Make sense? Okay, which one should we do next?
Brown.
Good choice. See, isn't that pretty color? It's like my bedroom. All right. Yell when you see something you might want to tell me about.
There.
Oh, you're yelling. What'd you see?
Blood.
Right. And why is that a red flag, literally, for pee? They're big, right? Those are proteins, so they should be too big to enter the filtration membrane. That means you broke your colander for them to be in there. That also makes the urine become more stuff in it. It looks like a flower. What is that called? Renal disease. Your kidney is sick. Because macaroni should not be in my sink if my colander is working. Okay? So I gave you a kidney punch or something is chewing on your kidney. Make sense? Yes?
Do boxers have this problem after?
Probably. If
Fighting
someone hits you hard
matches?
enough, I'd imagine. Besides all the other problems. Anyone that hits you right about here can damage a kidney and you could bleed afterwards. Let's do D. Yell when you see something.
Glucose.
What? We all have glucose. What's wrong with glucose?
Shouldn't be in your pee.
Should be your pee. That means I'm not reabsorbing it. I'm overloading the system. I don't want it. So what do you call it when you don't want your glucose anymore?
Diabetes.
Diabetes. Okay, so which of those is the sugar one?
Mellitus.
That's right, mellitus. Sweet tasting urine, right? And because there's sugar in it, you're getting a thicker osmolarity. It's turning syrupy, becoming thicker and thicker. So your urine is thicker, it's sweet, and has sugar in it because your body is trying to get rid of the sugar. Yes?
Just going back to the other renal disease, if you were like hit in the kidney,
Yes.
could your kidney fix itself, or is that
If it's
something
small damage, yes.
like for a boxer, it could
Yes.
right itself eventually?
So maybe as a kid, you might get a kidney punch, you bleed maybe, and then you seem to be okay. It's when you have repetitive injuries or large injuries, like a knife wound in the side of the bar,
Right.
you're dead. Right? Is that so? This is diabetes mellitus. You've overwhelmed your kidneys with sugar because you have way too much. So your kid's birthday party might do this for one day, but every day all the time, it's something else. It's diabetes mellitus. Make sense? Okay, so we're going to do B. Gee, I wonder what the answer is, right? Is there anything wrong with it chemically?
Creatinine.
No.
It's actually okay urine. If you look at the chemicals, that's no different than the normal urine, basically. What's wrong with it then?
Mo.
And look how much there is. And it's perfectly clear. And this means really, really liquid. So what we call it when you're peeing lots and lots of basic water and not much else. That's called diabetes insipidus. Literally drippy urine. So you overhydrated yourself or you have a problem with your ADH. So if you understand that concept of looking, big stuff shouldn't be in pee, stuff I reabsorb shouldn't be in my pee, and the amount in the water it determines this graph, then you can interpret any UA. Right? That's basically how it works. Make sense? Okay, so we're going to do one more little quiz on this. I like these kind of things. So if I were to give you an exam in about 3 weeks, I might have something that's similar to this logic train, if you can walk me through the steps. Let's see if we can do this. I'm going to make you dehydrated. That means your body of water went where?
Down.
Down. It means your blood thickness is getting
Up.
What's your ADH going to do if I'm dehydrated?
Release. More.
You sure?
Increase.
Yes? And this fancy language means channels in your nephron.
Increase.
More?
Yeah.
And that's going to do what to water reabsorption?
More.
More? Which is going to do what to urine concentration?
More. It's going to get more concentrated.
And then what's going to do the volume?
Decrease.
Bring it! But if you understood that logic of how I got from dehydration to the urine to the ADH, that graph, you understood this concept. Right? That's the logic. If you can go home and say, gee, I'm drinking a lot of water, my ADH should go down, my channels should go away, I reabsorb less. That's the logic you want to do. Make sense? Okay, so that sort of does the whole kidney thing. Now we got to make a bigger jump in logic. Go back from kidney to the rest of you. So we need to go back to our packet of pain here for a minute and find page 25. We're going to do some electrolyte and acid-base balance for this tonight. And we're going to see what happens when you mess up as a nurse. This is what these are. Find page 25. To understand this case study, you have to understand some language we're going to hit you with. All right, this thing is a cell. A la Biology 112. Okay, this thing I'm going to draw over here, here's your blood. A la Biology 232. We're going to have names for the water in these areas. These are called compartments. So you'll hear your doctor talk about the compartments of your body, their meaning where the fluids are. There are two. One of them is called your ICF. Can anyone guess what the I stands for? Intracellular fluid. So the ICF is intracellular fluid or intracellular compartment fluid. What does intracellular mean? Within the cell. So where on my picture is the ICF? In here, Mr. Cell. The fluid inside your cell is called the ICF. In Biology 112, what did you call the fluid inside a cell?
Cytoplasm.
Cytoplasm, very good. So the cytoplasm of a cell in anatomy land is called the ICF. They're the same, right? Just different class. So these things up here are not inside your cells. So what letters could we use for those? ECF. E stands for?
Extra.
Extracellular, outside the cell. So the extracellular fluid. Okay? So I have fluid inside my cells, ICF, and I have fluid inside my cells, and I have fluid outside my cell. So anything that's not the cell is going to be the ECF. But notice I put my language in two places. So let's see if we can break it down. What do you call the fluid around the blood cells?
Plasma.
Plasma. So plasma is one of the parts of the ECF. It's not inside the cells, it's around the cells. Make sense? Excuse me. So then you have this part here. That's not in the blood, but it's not yet in the cell. What do you call that area between the cells and the blood?
Interstitial.
Interstitial. Very good. You literally means between the tissues, right? But these areas are part of the ECF. They're not the cells, they're the stuff around the cells. So on my picture here, I have an ICF area, the cell, and I have two ECF areas, the blood, and the interstitial fluid. So let's go to our case study here, and we'll see why this matters. So we have the doctor who writes like I do, the nurse misreads it, and gives him the wrong IV, twice normal saline instead of half normal. You say fired and lawsuit. Right. Next morning, the man looks like the Michelin Man, and he can't breathe, and bad things happen. Now we gotta do 1A. The nurse's mistake about the saltiness. So let's figure out where the IV goes. Where do you put an IV? Into a vein. So where on my picture would the IV be going?
Blood.
Into the blood. So we're gonna do the IV here. The IV goes into your blood, right? What compartment is that? The ECF. What part of the ECF did you put the IV into? The plasma. So her, or his, IV went into the plasma part of the ECF. But I didn't ask you about the plasma in question 1A. I asked about the interstitial fluid, which is not there, but is here. So tell me what happened to the interstitial fluid. It would increase because these are the same. The two parts of the ECF always have the same values. They're freely exchangeable. So if you put something in the blood, it will end up around the cells. If it's around the cells, it will end up in the blood. So if you IV the blood, you also IV'd the interstitial fluid because the stuff can move between the two. That's why they're the same compartment, because they're the same fluid. So what happened to the interstitial fluid? It also increased in saltiness because the same compartment. Does that make sense? All right. So I'm going to show you a little animation of what I just did there. Kind of. And then I'll go back and we'll fill in the rest of that. Give me a second here. Gotta go here. Gotta go to there. Gotta go to there. So in case you don't know kind of how IVs work, so here's our patient. Here's the blood cell. So inside the blood cell will be the ICF. This is the plasma. It's ECF. So if I give you an IV that's isotonic, it's going to go into the plasma. And what should an isotonic IV do to your cells? Nothing, because I'm making the ECF and the ICF will stay the same, right? That's what isotonic meant in Biology 112. Make sense? So nothing has changed because the ECF and ICF have no differences. But what I did in your case study was a nurse gave you a hypertonic IV, one that's really salty. So I'm going to change the ECF out here where the blood is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the ECF more salty, or hypertonic. So from Biology 112, the outside of a cell becomes salty. What does the cell do? It shrinks. You lose water to the hypertonic environment because the cell doesn't change. The cell is the ICF. So the ECF change, the cell has to respond. So what should your cells do if I give you a hypertonic IV?
Shrink.
It should shrink or get small. Let's see if that's true. Here we go. Hypertonic IV. They should. So I'm changing the ECF, and that's going to draw water out of the ICF. Right? So what happened if you did the reverse? You did a hypotonic IV. What will the cells do?
Swell.
They'll swell. Because the ECF has less salt, more water. The ICF stays the same, so water goes into the cells. Right? That's the concept. So as I change the ECF, the ICF cells have to respond. So if we go back to our case study, right here. Your knowledge of osmosis, what are the cells going to do? They were going to shrivel. I made the outside of the cell saltier. That's going to draw water out of the inside of the cell. So they're going to get saltier or shrink. So increase, and they're going to shrink. Make sense? So tell me why our patient has edema. Why does he look like the Michelin Man?
Because you're getting all the water from the cells.
Very good. You're taking water out of your cells and putting it around your tissues. So your tissues are going to gain water out of your cells. Right? So as the water leaves my cells, the rest of my body gets full of water. Does that make sense? Right. So you're putting it around your tissues, around the blood. So tell me about this Rails thing. Why does he sound like he's gargling when he's breathing? Fluid in the lungs, same reason. The fluid's leaving his cells and going into his alveoli. So his lungs sound as though they're underwater. So the water is leaving the ICF and going everywhere that's not a cell. I can show you that. I can. By going here. Not that. Not that one. So we're going to do some edema here real fast. So here's our lady. She's getting edema. The water's leaving her ICF and going around her cells into her tissues, her ECF. So here's her ICF, these are her cells. Everything else on the screen's an ECF. So the water will be leaving her cells and filling up the rest of her body, all the little spaces, all the little tubes, and that's going to make her swell up. So to show you that that's true, I'm going to go here. I'm going to give her more salt than normal. I gave her an IV that's too salty. Here's the salt in the ECF, in the blood and around the cells. The cells then will lose water, and the water is going to end up around everything in my body. So I'm going to swell as the cells shrink. So if I lower the amount of salt in the body, like this here, I remove salt from the ECF, now the cells are going to gain water, so water is going to leave the ECF and enter the ICF. Make sense? So that's the concept. So the ECF and ICF are basically, the ECF is changing and the ICF is trying to compensate. So we go back to our case study.
Is there a visible sign of when the cells get swollen?
Usually they stop functioning. So like neurons will stop working when they get bigger. So let's do number 3. This is actually related to that graph. If I give you more sodium, what's aldosterone going to do? Let's go over here and find out. If I have too much salt, aldosterone should go down because I want to reabsorb less sodium by removing the channel. So aldosterone will go down when you have too much salt in your body. Does that make sense? If you have too much, you don't want more. So what else could you do if this happened to you? What other ways can you deal with salt in your body? Every bar knows this. What do they give you to eat at the bar?
Peanuts.
Why do they give you peanuts? So you'll drink more. So I can drink more water, try to neutralize the salt. Did a study on that. You spend $8 more for every free peanut they give you. It's amazing. Okay. So I can drink more first. Water retention. Make sense? So if you understand this ECF, ICF idea, and your IVs affect the E part, that's the important part you're supposed to know. The rest of tonight, we're actually going to do what's on the next page. You have to learn acidosis, alkalosis physiology. So we're going to spend some time on that. Prepare your mind, body, and soul. My former students that go into nursing school, ENT school, say this is something they do every day at their job is acid-base balance. So we're going to spend a lot of time so you understand that, so you'll do well at your career. So what we're going to do is we're going to write an equation on the board. Tell me when you remember this. Yeah, now, okay? This is the equation you're going to write down again, and you're going to memorize yet again. Where did you learn this before? What was it about? Respiratory system. But now we're going to use it in acid-base balance. And to do that, I'm going to shortcut the equation a little bit. I'm going to write 2 arrows on it. Can someone from chemistry tell me why the arrows are facing opposite directions? It's reversible. If you remember from what we learned, I go from left to right at my tissues, and I wrote it in reverse at my lungs. I can shortcut that by putting the arrows both ways. So I can go left to right, or I can go right to left. That's what the 2 arrows mean, the Lavoisier equilibrium. What you're going to do is you're going to write that down. You're going to draw a line right down the middle, just like that. And you're going to label each side for a different body part. So what part of your body deals with CO2?
Lungs.
Lungs. We're going to call this the respiratory side. So the left-hand side of my equation is going to be dealing with my lungs because my lungs deal with CO2. What part of your body deals with H's and HCO3s?
Tissues.
Blood and tissue. So we call that the metabolic side. Because that's your metabolism. That's your cells. That's your mitochondria. That's your kidneys. So you have a respiratory side on the left. You have a metabolic side on the right. Make sense? So you're always going to write it this way for me, and you'll never get wrong. Over here, you're going to write down 3 sets of values that thou shalt know, PCC says, and thou shalt. You are required to memorize the normal values for 3 things. The pH, the CO2, and the HCO3. Body pH, normal body pH is?
7.
7.35 to 7.45. That is the only answer I want out of you next week. 7.35 to 7.45. CO2 is?
60. 40.
35 to 45. 40, yeah.
What's that unit?
Yeah, what's the unit?
These are millimeters mercury. Right. And H2, HCO3 is 22 to 26. And that's milliequivalents per liter if you're really curious. I don't care if you know the units. Right? But you're going to memorize these and memorize that. Because with this and that, you can solve these problems. Right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through this case study using this logic. And before I do that, I'm going to hit you with some words we're going to add. So before I do this, there's some words you have to know in addition to those values. And the words are acidosis and alkalosis. Alrighty, can someone tell me what acidosis means? Too acidic, high acid levels. We'll say too acid.
Too basic.
And then alkalosis is too basic or not acid enough. Okay? These are called the effect. Alright? So you are too acidic or you're too basic because something happened. So the causes of that are the other two words you have to know. One of them is called respiratory. What do you think the other one is called? Metabolic. So these are why you're that. So when we say you have a respiratory cause, we mean it has something to do with your breathing. Gas exchange, lungs, something like that. What do you think we mean by metabolic? What would cause a problem metabolically?
Anaerobic metabolism.
Yes, so something like diet, energy, food, anything that's metabolism. So breathing or not breathing are basically the two choices. You notice that these words match those words, right? That's the logic of this. So you have a reason that you're becoming too acidic or too basic. So I'm going to walk you through some animations first, and then we'll go figure out the sequentials of this. So here we go. Before we do the case study, I'm going to walk you through an animation. Two of them, actually. Here. All right. So let's turn this on.
Chemical reactions that occur in the body are very sensitive to pH. Increased acidity is referred to as acidosis. Increased alkalinity is referred to as alkalosis. Small variations in the pH of blood can be fatal. Death occurs when the pH of blood is above 8.0 or below 6.8.
So you have to memorize the normal value, so not worry about that. But that's the idea, is if I get too acidic or too basic, I'm dead. Right? So your body has to figure out how to deal with that one. So we're going to go just to these two things we've learned.
The kidneys help to maintain acid-base balance by secreting hydrogen ions and reabsorbing hydrogen ions from the blood.
So if you remember that thing you took a picture of last week, remember this? Remember, your kidneys can secrete acid, right? Or reabsorb base. This is that logic. We're taking the kidney now and applying it to this equation. The kidney can handle the right-hand side of this equation. It can move these around. Make sense? So your kidney will be dealing with the metabolic part. Right? So your kidney can handle those chemicals.
The lungs help control acidosis or alkalosis by controlling the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. The circulatory system, lungs, and kidneys regulate acid-base balance in the body.
You learned that the first week of class, right? You can breathe off acid or retain acid. So I can use my lungs to solve some acid problems, or my kidneys to solve other acid problems. The trick is knowing when to use each one. So I'm going to go back to this for a second. We're going to walk you through some animations first before we do the equations. Let's find Patrick O'Shea. Where is he at? There he is. Boom. Here's Patrick O'Shea. God bless him, he's still smoking the Marlboros. Look at it, right there. Right there it is, all right. So what's wrong with Patrick? He's a smoker, which means his lungs are gone, right? But for this class, we're going to look in the upper left-hand corner. What disease does Patrick have? Besides emphysema, read these two words to me.
Respiratory acidosis.
Okay, now let's think like a doctor or a nurse. He is acidic because
He's a smoker.
your lungs are shot because you're a smoker. So doctors speak respiratory acidosis. Your respiratory system has failed you, and now you're more acidic than before. So we're going to come over to this equation right over here. And we're going to figure out how Patrick's body can fix this problem. So what you do is you find the side that's wrong. So his respiratory system is incorrect. So which of these chemicals on this side would be wrong to make him have respiratory acidosis? The CO2 would be high or low?
High.
It's high. He has high CO2. Remind me for your final why his CO2 is high. He can't blow it out, right? Okay, so if I can't blow it out, my respiratory system fails to remove the CO2. This is high. Where could he send that acid to get rid of it if he needs to? This equation says I can send it from here to my kidney, to my metabolic side. What will your kidney do with that? What do you think your kidney is going to do with extra acid? I'm going to excrete the acid out. So I'm going to excrete the acid in my urine. I'm going to urinate the acid out because I can't blow it out. So Patrick has respiratory acidosis, and he's compensating with metabolic compensation, or or sometimes renal, and metabolic compensation. So in English, his lungs have failed, his kidney has to fix it. It's always the opposite side of the equation. So his respiratory problem has a metabolic solution. Make sense? Okay, so he's going to take the acid from there and put it there. Yes. Okay.
Is that why smokers can live for a while?
Yeah, until their kidneys go and then you die.
Okay.
Yes.
So would his urine be way more acidic than
Yes.
his? Okay.
Remember, your normal urine is between 8 and about 5. Smokers can have urine of like 4 or 3 because they're basically putting their CO2 into their pee. Cool, eh? So he's going to take and do metabolic compensation for respiratory acidosis. Make sense? All right, so let's do this over. So if you click on our choices here, which of these choices would compensate for respiratory acidosis? Which of those is the true answer for that question?
Excrete hydrogen.
The kidneys will excrete the acid,
And retain
and they can do something else. What is it?
retain the.
They can keep base. Remember, I can reabsorb. So I can also reabsorb base. So I'm going to flush this one out and keep this one in. And that would make me less acidic. Does that make sense? So a shortcut in your nursing career is nurses will say that's called a, what's he doing? It's called a right shift. You took the acid from the left of the equation and you shifted the acid to the right of the equation. So you could say a right shift if you wanted to say that. But formally, respiratory acidosis with metabolic compensation. Make sense? So we're going to do another one. Okay? So let's try this one. Who should do? I'll do Sally. Sally. Here's Sally. What is she doing?
Breathing hard.
Breathing really fast. So let's do some doctor speak. What acid-base disorder does she have? So tell me, I get the respiratory, she's breathing wrong. Tell me why she's alkalotic. She blew off her CO2, right? If I breathe faster, my CO2 gets blown away. I don't have an eraser. So let's go back to our equation and see if we can guess what's going to happen. Okay, so which side of the equation is wrong in Sally?
Metabolic.
Nope. Respiratory, right? She's breathing wrong. So this number is low. She has low CO2 because she breathed it all away. That makes her have respiratory alkalosis. Her left side of the equation has low CO2. Or where could she go to get more acid to make up for the low CO2? Tell me, eh? I can steal it from the other side. I use the opposite side to compensate. So she can take acid from here to remake there. So this would be metabolic compensation. She's going to keep acid. Her kidney is going to retain acid. So my urine acid is going to be put back in my body. And what shift are we doing?
Left.
That's called a left shift. I'm taking the acid from the kidney and sending it to the lungs. So we call that a left shift. If you take chemistry, right, Lavoisier's shifts that way. Make sense? So you find the side that's wrong, you go to the other side to fix it, and you just figure out which way the acid has to go to be fixed. Okay? Now we're going to do one more, and then we'll start doing numbers. Okay. Let's find Jose. Where's Jose? I know Jose's out here. Oh yeah, here's Jose. Oh, let's watch that again. Okay, so he just threw up, right? Look at up here. What's he have?
Metabolic alkalosis.
Metabolic alkalosis. Let's see if we can figure out why he's metabolically alkalotic. So first off, why is it on this side of the equation? Why is it over here, not over there?
Just doesn't deal with breathing.
Doesn't do with breathing. Throwing up has nothing to do with your lungs, has everything to do with what you eat. So he has an eating problem, quote, quote, so he's metabolic. That make sense? Tell me why he's alkalotic.
Puked out his,
He puked out his acid. That works for me. He's losing acid. His stomach's acidic. The acid's now on the floor, not in him. So he's less acidic. Therefore, this number went down, which means this number essentially is high. He has too much base, not enough acid in his metabolic side. That make sense? So he's in metabolic alkalosis. What side is going to fix this problem? It's respiratory side, the opposite side. So how can you get more acid to replace what he lost on the floor?
Breathing.
I'd want to take acid from here and replace the acid I lost, right? How do I build up acid in my lungs? I have to breathe slower. So he's going to breathe slower. So that's respiratory compensation. What shift is that? It's a right shift. I'm taking acid from my lungs and sending it to my kidneys or sending it to my metabolism. You follow the acid. So he has metabolic alkalosis with respiratory compensation with a right shift. That make sense? Okay. Now, if you understood that idea, we're going to do some more. This time, we're going to make it a little different. Because we're now going to start throwing some numbers at you. We're going to play the acid-base game. Come on down! All right. So you're going to have to start looking at the values over here that thou shalt memorize. I'm going to dim the light so you can see it. So we're going to do these scenarios. You can first have to figure out if it's acid or base, if it's breathing or not, and then from there. So let's do, say hello to Dan. Dan is our first contestant. Dan has diarrhea. Tell me what his acid's going to do if you have diarrhea.
Low acid.
So you remember that chart you learned for your exam? The intestines are the acid or base?
Base.
Base. So if I have diarrhea, I'm losing base from my intestines.
Oh, more acidic.
Therefore, I'm going to become more
Acidic.
So my pH will go
Down.
down, because pH goes down when you're more acidic. So it's asking me to measure the base level metabolically. So we go to our equation over here. Right? If he's losing this number should do what? He's losing base. This number should go down if he's pooping it on the floor, right? He's losing base. So the base level should go down from the metabolic base. He's pooping it on the floor. So we're going to put that together. What acid-base problem does he have? He's pooping and becoming more acidic. Metabolic
Acidosis.
Let's make sure. It's not respiratory, right? Poop has nothing to do with air. So it's going to be metabolic acidosis, metabolic alkalosis. He's getting more acidic, therefore it's metabolic acidosis. He's becoming more acidic because of pooping. How will he compensate? What system would compensate for metabolic disorder?
Respiratory.
So your breathing would change to compensate. So it's the opposite side of the equation. Make sense?
Question, would constipation do the opposite?
I've never checked on that, but my intuition tells me probably yes, but I have to look it up. I've never actually looked that up. That's cool. Yes.
What if you have both, you're both throwing up and you have diarrhea?
Then you essentially would stay neutral, so you wouldn't be acid values more often. Yeah, you're gonna poop one way. Yeah, you're losing acid. You'll have electrolyte problems all day long, but you won't be acid or base.
How do you breathe differently?
You just slow or raise your breathing rate.
Okay.
So next time you have diarrhea, if you count your breathing rate while you're sitting there, you'll find that it's different than before. I have nothing better to do with my life.
So dehydration doesn't necessarily
Right, exactly.
correlate, because I was thinking with throwing out dehydration.
Yeah, that's a separate issue than the acid-base thing. So here we have Martin. Martin didn't wear his helmet. Good luck, man. Now he's breathing too fast. So let's go through it. He's breathing too fast. First thing I figure out if he's acid or base. If I'm breathing faster, I'm going to become alkaline, right? I'm blowing off my acid, which means my pH should go up. Now they're having me measure the CO2. So if I'm breathing faster, the CO2 in my body should go down. Very good. So put it together. He has
Respiratory.
respiratory alkalosis. His breathing problem made him less acidic. How could he fix that? His kidneys, his metabolism would have to compensate. See the logic I'm using here? So it's like a math problem. You first figure out if you're acid or base, try to figure out which one's wrong, and then try to figure out which one's going to correct it. It's the same pattern. And now we're going to go for big money. We have bumper bucks riding on this, people. Come on. Okay, so now we have Clarissa. 7.5. Looking over there, you're going to tell me what that is.
Alkalosis.
High pH is more basic, so she's in
Alkalosis.
alkalosis. You made me $100. Now it's asking me to check her HCO3 or bicarbonate level. So first you have to figure out what side bicarbonate's on. What side of the equation is bicarbonate on?
Metabolic.
Hey! So we're checking her metabolism side. That's going to be our key. We're checking the right side. So I'm going to check her HCO3. And it is, boom, 30. Yowza! So tell me what that means.
High.
That's high. Is that consistent with being alkaline?
Yes.
You bet it is. So now tell me, her right side of the equation has too much base and she's alkaline, therefore she is in metabolic alkalosis. Look at you. She drank baking soda. So the right side of the equation is the wrong one. That's the cause to make her alkaline. Make sense, the logic? Okay, now, bonus round. How is her body going to recover from metabolic alkalosis? I'm going to vote for breathing slower. I have one lonely voice and there's another one. Breathing faster. Okay. Can we agree she's going to breathe differently? Right? This is the opposite side. If I breathe faster, I'm going to make myself less acidic. If I breathe slower, I'm going to make myself more acidic. Which one would compensate for being alkalosis? Slower. I want to retain acid in my body. So I'm going to breathe slower to keep the acid building up. I'm going to have a right shift on my equation. Here's Marianne. Come on down. Okay, tell me from over there.
Low.
Acidic.
So give me the word.
Acidosis.
Acidosis. I'm checking her CO2 levels. 48.
High.
High, which is that consistent with being acidosis?
Yes.
You bet it is. So her CO2 is wrong. She's acidic. Tell me her disorder. Respiratory acidosis. Very good. Her breathing is wrong. That made her acidic. How could she fix respiratory acidosis? Well, she can't breathe because her lungs are wrong. So it has to be something in the metabolic side. So therefore she's going to pee the acid and keep the base. Make sense? So it's the opposite side compensating for the lungs. Yeah. Make sense? What?
That was a left shift?
It would be a right shift.
Right
You're
shift.
trying to take the acid. Wait, what was she? She was.
No, good luck.
I'm sorry. She's respiratory acidosis. Yeah, it'd be a right shift. She's trying to send the acid to her kidneys. It'd be right shift. Yeah.
So what about that scenario would have given her cardiac arrest? Like which one of those is so severe?
Because once you get to about 7.3, your heart begins to misfire. Not a good day. So we're going back to this thing. I'm going to walk you through this one as a class together, and then we'll do another. So I realize some of you know this really well and all that. Just bear with me, okay? I'm just going to try to teach you all this. So there's two ways you can do these case studies. You can read about the patient, try to guess if they threw up or vomited or whatever. I'm going to suggest you don't do that, that you just go to the numbers and use the numbers and then use the case to kind of confirm. Because you can do things as a patient that confuse you. So the first thing you're going to do in all these problems, in my class, the first thing you want to do is look at the pH. That's your first go-to. 7.3, tell me what it is.
Low.
That's low, which means it is acidosis. We're halfway done with the first question. We know this person, this girl's acidosis. Does that make sense? The second thing you're going to do in these problems is go to the numbers that talk about the PCO2 and the HCO3, because the CO2 is on the left side of the equation, the HCO3 is on the right side of the equation. So I have a snapshot of the two sides. Look at the CO2, it's 50. Tell me what that is.
High.
That's high. HCO3 is 24. That is perfectly fine. Put it together. What does she have? Which side of the equation is wrong? This one, right? That's the cause. So she has respiratory acidosis. The excess CO2 is making her become more acidic. Understand that logic? Find the pH, look at the two other numbers, see which side's wrong. Okay, we're going to skip question 2 for a second. Go right to question 3. How would you compensate for respiratory acidosis? Let's go over here. You would write the equation out, and then I'm going to figure out, okay, so she has high CO2. How can her body get rid of CO2? I'm going to send it to the other side into my urine. So I'm going to excrete acid and retain base. And we're going to call that metabolic compensation. Your metabolism would compensate, also called a right shift. That make sense? Always the opposite side to get rid of it. So that's a perfect A answer on next week's quiz. If you can go through line by line and figure out this. Right? So let's go back up to question 2. Why does cystic fibrosis make you respiratory acidotic? You can't breathe, right? Your lungs are full of crud. Therefore, you can't exhale the CO2, so it builds up with time. Make sense? Okay, scroll down. This one's all yours. I'm not going to help you. Case number 3, figure out what it is, and tell me how you compensate. We're going to give you 2 minutes with your team. Talk together.
Metabolic alkalosis.
Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. We'll go over it. Struggle for a minute.
I guess you do breathe last when you were 6. No, I think about it.
So it depends which one. So if you have
Why?
You felt like shit.
Yeah, that's
You just
what I
wanted
thought
to
too.
die.
Right.
He's slow enough all the time.
So if you have low acid, you're also going to breathe slower. So these two are the same. Low acid, high base, will stay with Okay, your 2 minutes is up. So let's go through it line by line. I'm just going to show you how I would do it on a test if I'm that way.
What we come up with?
First thing, pH 7. I'm never going to read the case. I'm just going to go pH 7.5. I memorize my values, and that means it is
Basic.
alkalosis or basic. So I'm halfway there. I know she's in alkalosis. Rule 2, I look at the two numbers. CO2 is 40, HCO3 is 32. Which of those is the wrong one? HCO3, that's high. So that means her problem is metabolic alkalosis. I combined the wrong side with the wrong pH. Make sense? I'm going to skip right down to question 3. So how would you compensate? So we go over to our equation that I would write down. We prove that she has high amount of this, which also sort of means she has a low amount of acid. How can I get more acid into her body? She doesn't have enough. I can breathe slower. I can do respiratory compensation. I'm going to take the acid from here, shove it there by breathing slower. Also called a right shift. Respiratory compensation with a right shift. Make sense what I did? So I just go to the equation, I use that logic. So let's go back up a question. Why did vomiting cause this? Because you what? You lost your acid, you lose acid. So if that made sense for you, how to go that, that's what your quiz next week will be on, is acid-base dynamics. To help you do that, I have a homework assignment.
In addition to what we already have, or?
Yes. Well, I'm special in many ways, but worry not. I'm going to teach you a shortcut way to do acid-base physiology I learned at a conference 2 weeks ago. It's called the ABC tic-tac-toe. I'm going to show you another way to do these that you may find easier to understand. If not, that's fine. These are practice problems. As you do, you learn this by practicing up to the wazoo.
Oops. Feel free to cut that off.
Yeah, I'm totally doing post.
Yeah, you should do that as soon as possible. Because I don't have my recorder.
That's fine. Life is just a Vegas game.
I'll totally get on that Wednesday.
So mean.
Okay. So I'm going to show you another way to do these problems. The way I showed you works. That's what I learned. There's another way as invented by an RN called the tic-tac-toe method. If you go to that page, you'll learn about it. But she basically came up with a simple way to do it. And the way you do it is you make kind of like a tic-tac-toe grid. Okay? Your tic-tac-toe grid has 3 columns and 3 rows. The columns are going to be acid, normal, or base. You can substitute alkalosis and acidosis. Right? Your 3 rows are going to be the pH, the CO2, and the HCO3, the numbers we've been talking about. Okay? By putting them in different boxes, you saw the relationship better. So look at number 1. We'll do this as a class. We're just going to go right to the numbers. Robert Miller's pH was 7.26. If I memorize my values, which thou shalt know, 7.26 is where?
Basic. I mean, acid.
Acid, right? So I'm going to put the 7.26 in the acid column because that pH is acidic. Are you with me? Then I'm going to look at the other two numbers and put them in the columns based on their values. The CO2 is 42. According to our numbers, where's 42 going to be? Normal. So I put the CO2 in the normal category. The HCO3 is 17. That is low base is high acid. So I put the HCO3 there. And you find the columns where the pH and the chemical line up. That means I'm in metabolic alkalosis because I'm in the same column. The column tells you the answer. So I'm in metabolic alkalosis. So where the columns line up is where the answers belong. So I'm acidic because I have low HCO3. Make sense? So she did it visually that way. Yes?
How do you know it's metabolic again?
Because the HCO3 is in the same column as the pH value.
So if it were the CO2 level that we're off, it
So
would
if
be-
this were normal and that were there, it'd be respiratory acidosis. Make sense? So the thing you gotta remember is low HCO3 means more acidity. So this number becomes acidic. So this pH and this number, this must be the cause of that because it's the same side of the line. That's called the tic-tac-toe method. Right? But you haven't compensated yet. So if you look at your instructions, your first job is to figure out the problem. You have to figure out if you've compensated or not. So what you do then is look at the pH.
It's not computing it.
The pH is wrong, you have not compensated yet. So there's no compensation. You have not fixed the problem at all. You're still acidotic. So question 1 is metabolic acidosis with no compensation. You haven't fixed anything. Make sense? That's the logic of this. Yes?
What is partial or complete?
That's what we'll do next. Go down to, let's do number 3. We'll do this one as a class. Again, if this method sort of bugs you, you can always go back and do it this way, the other way. Right. So let's do the same thing for question 3. Okay, make my tic-tac-toe. Acid, normal, base, pH, CO2, HCO3. Okay, what's the pH on question 3? 7.29 is acidic, very acidic. So I know the patient's acidic. Then I look at the two numbers. The CO2 is 32, which is low, which means it is
Acidic.
No, low CO2 is basic. All right. HCO3 is 15, which is, that's really low, which means it is acidic. Okay, now let's name it. You're acidic because of the same column. So why is she acidic? Because it's metabolic alkalosis. The HCO3 and the pH, I'm sorry, acidosis. I didn't say alkalosis, sorry. Acidosis are in the same column. But notice the CO2 is wrong. Why is the CO2 over here? It's trying to compensate. So she has partial respiratory compensation. The CO2 has changed from normal and is trying to compensate for the wrong acidity. So partial means you're still wrong, but the other number has changed. You're shifting the equation. Yes?
How would you know that it's metabolic acidosis as opposed to respiratory acidosis?
Because these
Just
two-
look- But like without using, like if you were just to look at the numbers, how would you be able to tell?
That would be harder to do if you just looked at the numbers. You'd have to then know that this number is further down than this one. That's why she came up with the box.
Okay.
You'd have to look at the case and realize he's breathing fine. And so if there were complete compensation, what do you think the pH would do if you had complete compensation? It'd be back to normal, right? So complete compensation, your pH will be back to normal, but these numbers might be still off. So your homework, or you can do it now, is to do these 6 problems, bring them next week. We'll talk about them as part of our learning experience. But the last thing you're doing is to do these. And then we're done for the night. So you can leave and study for your exam, you can work on these, whatever you choose to do.
You said it is complete compensation.
The pH